I don't think of Elvis like that because I know too many artists that are far greater than Elvis.
Ray Charles was one of the few pioneers to combine jazz, blues, gospel, and R&B into a genre that would later be known as soul music. But following Ray Charles's death, his children have recently spoke out and confirmed some shocking rumors regarding Ray. But before we get into these rumors, we need to know how Ray's early life shaped him into the man he would later become. Early life. Born in Georgia on the 23rd of September 1930, Ray was the fruit of an encounter between Aretha, his mother, and a married man named Bailey, who later abandoned his original wife and Ray's mother to marry another woman elsewhere. As a child, Ray was fascinated by mechanical objects, mainly cars and farm machinery. But when did the musical side of Ray come to life? As early as 3 years old, Ray was at Wiley Pittman's Red Wing Cafe when his musical curiosity was sparked. He was amused by Pittman's skill in playing an old upright piano. Pittman always welcomed Ray and his mother at the cafe in assistance of their financial issues. He would later teach Ray Charles how to play the piano. Life for Ray did not start out as many knew him to be, a blind man playing some good soul music. Ray was born with full sight, and he could see as clearly as day. It was only when he was 4 years old that he started losing his vision to what was suspected as glaucoma, and sadly, became fully visually impaired by the age of 7. While attending school in St. Augustine at the Florida School for the Deaf and the Blind, he picked up the skills he had learnt from Pittman and learned how to play the classical piano. Ray was specially gifted, as he even learned some of the most difficult skills, such as using Braille music while at school. Ray's time at school was short-lived when his mother died in 1945 when he was only 14 years old. The pain in little Ray's heart was so immense that he decided not to go back to school after the funeral of his mother. Early career. In his 20s, Ray Charles Robinson Sr. embarked on a journey of combining jazz, blues, rhythm and blues, and gospel styles to come up with the melodic sound of soul music while recording for Atlantic Records. But Ray did not start combining blues, jazz, rhythm, and blues out of the blue. He had to start somewhere. When Ray left school as a teenager, he moved to Jacksonville Town, where he spent time playing the piano for bands for over a year while living with Charles Wayne, his late mother's friend. While at Jacksonville Town, Ray joined the local 632, and he would use the Union Hall's piano to practice since he did not have one back at home. Ray became of the world's known pianist, just by copying piano licks from the other players in the hall, and the little lessons he got from Pittman and during his time in school. Although he gained recognition as an upcoming artist in Jacksonville, it wasn't as fast as he would have wanted. He therefore decided to move to Orlando at the age of 16, where he would live in abject poverty and would at times miss some meals. As a musician, it was pretty hard for him to land a job during those days since the World War II had just ended. After an unsuccessful piano audition to play for Lucky Millinder in 1947, Ray moved to Tampa, where he managed to get 2 jobs. One of the jobs was playing the piano for Charles Brantley's Honey Dippers, but Ray wanted something bigger than playing the piano for bands. He dreamt of having a band of his own. Rise to fame. In March 1948, he moved to Seattle, Washington, following his close friend Gussie McKee, where he also met Milton Garrett. The three formed the McSon Trio, with Ray on piano, McKee on guitar, and Milton Garrett on bass. They would play at the rocking chair shift from 1 to 5 a.m., and this was where Ray Charles would gain publicity from the photos taken of the band. The trio recorded Confession Blues, which soared up the Billboard R&B charts to the 2nd spot. During his time at the rocking chair, Ray managed to arrange songs for other artists such as Dizzy Gillespie's Emanon and Cole Porter's Ghost of a Chance. It was during his time in Seattle that Ray managed to make friends with the 15-year-old Quincy Jones under Robert Blackwell. Ray would later move to Los Angeles in 1950, where he toured with Lowell Fulson as his musical director. a producer by the name Henry Stone, was amused by Ray's performance at a certain hotel in Miami in 1950 and decided Ray's rockin' record. However, the record didn't gain much popularity. Atlantic Records. In 1952, Ray's life changed when Atlantic Records bought his contract for $2,500. This was a move that was initiated by Ahmet Ertegun, a Turkish-American record executive. Apart from being a gifted musician, Ray was also a gifted producer. One of the most remembered songs he produced was Guitar Slim's hit song, The Things I Used to Do. During his time with Atlantic Records, Ray recorded The Midnight Hour, Mess Around, It Should Have Been Me, Sinner's Prayer, Don't You Know, among other great hits. By 1958, Ray Charles was a big name in the music scene. He was headlining major venues such as the Newport Jazz Festival, Carnegie Hall, and the Apollo Theater in New York. But his greatest achievement with Atlantic Records was when he recorded What Did I Say?, a combination of jazz, blues, gospel, and rhythm and blues. Despite the song being banned in various radio stations due to its explicit lyrics, it spiraled up the Billboard to reach number 6 on Billboard Pop Chart and number 1 on Billboard R&B chart. He would later on record more songs with Atlantic Records in the same year. The songs included his first country song, which was a cover of Hank Snow's I'm Moving On, which was followed by a jazz album, The Genius After Hours in 1961, and The Genius Sings the Blues, which was a blues record in the same year, and The Genius of Ray Charles in 1959, which was a big band record. Crossover. Ray did not renew his contract with Atlantic Records when it expired in 1959. Instead, he opted to sign with ABC Paramount in November the same year. He was offered a very lucrative deal, which included a $50,000 in annual advance, and he also received higher royalties. Ray was recognized as a great song composer during his time with Atlantic Records, but he gave up on songwriting by the time of the release of his famous Genius plus Soul equals Jazz. During this time, he was mainly thinking on being a cover artist. In 1960, Ray's first hit single for ABC Paramount, Georgia on My Mind, won 4 Grammy Awards. He was honored with the Best Vocal Performance Single Record or Track in the male category for his song Georgia on My Mind, and Best Performance by a Pop Single Artist for the same song. His song Hit the Road, which was written by Percy Mayfield, the R&B singer, also managed to win him another Grammy Award. By late 1961 into the early 1962, Ray was one of the first black artists who managed to cross to the mainstream pop with a big band and a high level of creative control. This moment of greatness was momentarily put on pause when the police discovered some illegal substances in his hotel room, but the case was dismissed due to the lack of proper warrant by the police involved in the search. In 1960, the world nearly lost the legendary soul artist when his pilot lost visibility due to the windshields being covered with ice. Miraculously, the pilot made a few circles in the air and luckily managed to see through a very small part of the windshield, enabling him to land the plane. Ray Charles thought of this incident as a spiritual or a supernatural intervention to save his life. His musical career was halted in 1964 when he was caught with substances. Ray chose to go to a rehabilitation facility to avoid getting a jail term on his name. It was during this time that he managed to kick away the bad habit that had tried to spoil his good life. Just as the king he is, Ray came back stronger and better. After spending a year on parole, he was back to rocking the charts in 1966 with hits such as I Don't Need a Doctor and Let's Go Get Stoned. He would even go further to getting a Grammy Award for his cover song Crying Time, which was originally done by Buck Owens. Battle with rock music. In the 1970s, Ray's music struggled with gaining airplay on radio stations as psychedelic rock music was taking over the airwaves. This included harder forms of music such as hard rock and hard R&B. Ray was still persistent with his music regardless of the new wave in town. He decided to leave ABC in 1974 and started recording on his own record label, Crossover Records. He managed to win another Grammy after the 1975 recording of Stevie Wonder's Leaving for the City. Ray would later return to Atlantic Records when he reunited with the Turkish-American businessman and record executive Ahmet Ertegun in 1977. During this second phase with Atlantic Records, he managed to record the famous True to Life album. Things were tough at this time because the label had started focusing on the wave at the time, rock acts. His songs were not forgotten, though, as his hit song, Georgia on My Mind, was declared the official state song of Georgia in 1979, giving Ray the chance to perform on the floor of the state legislature. But apart from his music, the glitz and glam of his life, who was Ray Charles? Who was the man inside the soulful legend? Love life. Ray was a well-known lover boy. Losing his innocence at the age of 12 to a much older lady, his hook for women had taken a grip. Charles barely lasted a year in his first marriage, with his second one lasting a whopping 22 years. Yes, he managed to maintain a 22-year-old marriage. But that did not keep the lover boy from playing his cards with the ladies. He had several relationships with several women, and in those relationships, Ray fathered a dozen children. He was first married to Eileen Williams on the 31st of July, 1951. This marriage was short-lived to 1952. In 1954, he met Della Beatrice Howard Robinson, who he used to call B, in Texas. The lovebirds got married on the 5th of April, 1955. During the same year, in Ray's absence, as he was playing a show in Texas, Della Beatrice gave birth to their first son, Ray Charles Robinson, Jr. They would later get 2 more children, Robert and David, and they raised their 3 children in View Park, California. It was not all rosy for the couple. Della Beatrice struggled with Ray's substance use and the frequent outside affairs that Ray exhibited during his tours. She decided to call it quits and filed for a divorce, which took an extraordinary amount of time after being filed in 1977, prolonging their marriage to 22 years before it was finalized. Ray the lover boy had an over half-a-decade-long relationship with Maggie Hendricks, who was part of the musical group, the Raelettes. The two managed to have a son together by the name Charles Wayne. He also had an affair with Mae Mosley Lyles. The two had a child together by the name Renee, who was born in 1961. Ray also had an affair with a woman by the name Sandra Jean Betts, and two would go on to have a daughter who they called Sheila Ray Charles. Sheila Ray Charles was a special kid. Just like her father, Sheila Ray was a good singer and songwriter. Unfortunately, Sheila Ray succumbed to breast cancer and died on the 15th of June 2017. Ray also had a Parisian lover by the name Arlette Kochunian. The two had met way back in 1967, and a decade later, in 1977, the two had a child together. The woman who was by Ray's side by the time of his death was Norma Pinella. In total, Ray had 12 children with 10 different women. In 2002, Ray held a luncheon and called his entire family, where only 10 of his 12 children were in attendance. This was due to the fact that Ray was critically ill, and he thought of having one last dance with his children. The man with 12 children from 10 different women was a man of power. But how did Ray manage to play his cards right, to become such a powerful man? To be powerful, you have to be wealthy first. And Ray was handsomely wealthy. Behind him stood another man, the man behind the man, Joe Adams, the brain in Ray's legendary success story, Ray Charles and Joe Adams. In 1959, Ray Charles started working with Joe Adams, where Joe was Ray's manager. Joe was not a new face to the world of entertainment, as he had been both an actor and a disc jockey. Joe Adams would manage Ray's music career and his business affairs. He was portrayed as the man behind the man for his unwavering 4-decade-long relationship with Ray. The relationship between Ray and Joe was based on great friendship, and it was a shared vision to make Ray's music and brand a success. The man behind the man, Joe Adams, met with Ray Charles during a very important phase in Ray's musical journey. Ray was just getting started on achieving national recognition, and this was by far the most perfect time for the two to meet. This was the time when the blues, jazz, rhythm and blues and gospel fusion of Ray's music was hitting the airwaves. Initially, Ray was just looking for a smart business manager, a smart person who was capable enough to navigate the complex world of the music and entertainment industry. Who else was a better man for the job than Joe Adams? Joe Adams was just the perfect man to execute the role. He understood the entertainment industry like the back of his hand, and he exhibited extraordinary organizational skills. The two would later become to be well known as the dynamic duo. Joe Adams was the kind of manager who fought hard to ensure that Ray received the best deals available. He was at the helm of negotiating better deals for Ray, organizing some of the best and high-profile and lucrative musical tours you could ever imagine. And not only that, Joe was the man behind Ray becoming one of the first African Americans to gain high level of his musical control and his business affairs. In 1960, when Ray received one of the most lucrative contracts of his career when he signed with ABC Paramount, Joe Adams was the brains behind the success of the negotiation of this contract. This contract was so lucrative that it not only gave Ray a huge financial boost, but it also included getting Ray the ownership rights of his master songs. At that time, something like this to happen required a pure genius to negotiate such a deal. This made Ray to cruise to the highest levels of his styles as he maintained his artistic integrity. Joe Adams' job did not just end at the business level of things. He often played a critical role in shaping Ray's public image. Joe would often present Ray as a versatile artist, and this would always hit the perfect spot, especially by refining his public performances and appearances. The management skills of Joe and his unique industry vision not only helped Ray gain popularity among the African Americans, but also it went far and beyond to capture the different races and increase Ray's fan base to a greater levels. It led to Ray's success in music breaking down some of the racial barriers in the entertainment industry. As if this was not enough, Joe showed a great bond between him and Ray as he helped him in his addiction in substance use. When Ray had no one to turn to when he needed help with his addiction, Joe was always by his side to not only help him with his business and music career, but also his personal life. He played a role of more than just a manager. He was a friend in need. He was always standing by him during all the highs and lows of Ray's addiction and the rehabilitation phase, all the way to becoming clean. Joe was still with Ray all this time and ensured that Ray gained stability and he got back to the music scene as if he never left. Just like any long-term relationship, it was not always roses between Ray and Joe. As expected, there was some little bumps on the road, and this is normal, especially in a relationship that involved finances most of the time. At times, the two were at loggerheads and would find themselves in disagreements and conflicts. But the amount of mutual respect, love, and vision shared among the two great men surpassed all the challenges they faced as a dynamic duo. Joe was Ray's all-round guy, and the go-to man when Ray needed a manager, a promoter, a confidant, or even a personal advisor. Unlike other managers who would tell their artists to focus on certain styles and avoid others, Joe would always embrace whatever decision that Ray would make in his style. He allowed Ray to maintain his innovation and creativity, which harnessed the creation of beautiful music by combining different rendition in one colorful and melodic genre. This freedom given to Ray by his manager allowed him to not only create good music, but was also the cornerstone of the good relationship that was shared between Ray and Joe. Ray and Joe always shared an interpersonal touch that was way far beyond the business facade. They genuinely cared about each other's well-being, and this enriched their professional relationship even deeper. Over the years, Joe was Ray's friend, manager, promoter, and personal aide. During this time, they made some of the most popular soul music such as The Genius Hits the Road, Genius plus Soul equals Jazz, modern sounds in country and western music. As well as being in control of Ray Charles Enterprises, Joe made sure that everything about Ray would always blossom. This relationship was so strong that it is always referred to as the best and longest artist-management relationship. For 40 years, the two combined to create a force that ruled the music world for the longest time ever. Ray's death. Ray Charles had a very successful hip surgery in the year 2003. He was feeling okay, and everything was working well for him, as he was even planning on going for other musical tours. Unfortunately, Ray started developing other ailments, and he was not strong enough to withstand the winds. On the 10th of June 2004, the legendary soul singer died at the ripe age of 73 at his lovely home in Beverly Hills, in California. This was a result of liver failure. 8 days after Ray's death, a funeral service was held at the First African Methodist Episcopal Church of Los Angeles. In attendance were some of the musical greats such as Stevie Wonder, Wynton Marsalis, B.B. King, and Glenn Campbell, and they each played a funeral tribute to Ray Charles Robinson. 2 months after his death, his final album was released, which was called Genius Loves Company. This album featured musical greats such as B.B. King, Johnny Mathis, Norah Jones, Diana Krall, Bonnie Raitt, Elton John, Michael McDonald, Natalie Cole, Gladys Knight, Willie Nelson, James Taylor, and Van Morrison. This great album would later win 8 Grammy Awards, which included the Best Gospel Performance from his song with Gladys Knight, Heaven Help Us All, Best Pop Vocal Album, Album of the Year, Best Pop Collaboration with Vocals from his song with Norah Jones, Here We Go Again, and of course, Record of the Year Award. Ray's children versus Joe Adams. After Ray's death in 2004, he left behind the 12 children he had sired with 10 different women. Ray had had a tremendous career, and when he died, Joe Adams, his longtime manager, became the chairperson of Ray Charles Foundation, and he was at the helm of Ray Charles Enterprises. Although Joe had a great relationship with Ray, Ray's children accused their dad's former manager of mismanagement of his estate and trusts and tarnishing Ray's legacy. Joe had released 2 CDs, which according to Ray's children, their father would have never approved the release of the 2 CDs. Some of Ray's children accused Joe of holding too much power on Ray Charles Foundation and Ray Charles Enterprises, and also excluding them from their father's business. They sought a formal investigation of their late dad's wealth to uncover any foul play by Joe Adams. These allegations were put forward to the FBI, the county's prosecutor office of Los Angeles, and the Office of the Attorney General in California. Robert Robinson, who is one of Ray's children, said that, "The biggest issue with me is disrespect for the family and kids," adding that, "If you respect a man and his work, then respect his kids. His blood is flowing through our veins." Ray's children said that their father had left behind $500,000 for each one of them to be paid off over the next 5 years in a family meeting they held by their late father in 2002, when Ray realized that he was critically ill and had decided to call for a family luncheon and meeting to address his children and share a small bit of his will. They were told that they will get even more money down the line, and some interpreted this to mean that they would inherit the right to license their father's name for profit. The value of Ray's music